Today, I want to have a discussion about a very popular theory going around right now. And what that theory is that Zykov isn't all that he seems. And in fact, he's not Zykov at all. And instead, the person who has been talking to us, calling himself Zykov, is actually just the Forsaken pretending to be Zykov in order to manipulate both Requiem and Omega into freeing him from the Dark Aether. Now, what I want to do in this discussion is talk about why do people actually think Zykov is the Forsaken, and then after that I want to go over if this really is as, I guess, strong of a theory as everyone is currently making it out to be. And I guess with all that said, let's go ahead and get into this. To start this off, I think we could do a very quick summary of who Zykov is. And who he is, and his full name is actually Kazimir Zykov. Now, who Zykov is actually he was originally a Soviet engineer during World War II who was familiar with a couple German technologies. And because of this, he was the one that the Soviets volunteered to go shut down the cyclotron in Moscow, Poland at the end station facility, or as we know it, the Machina. And while here, he figured out the only way to shut down this rift or connection between the regular world and the Dark Aether was by entering into the Dark Aether and shutting it down from this side. And of course, he does this and is trapped in the Dark Aether. But while he is trapped in the Dark Aether, he doesn't give up, and he does a lot of different things, and he documents absolutely everything through documents that we get in the intel that are all marked with day and then some time after that. This, of course, starting off with day 1, going all the way to day 13,784. And then from here, this is where he starts communicating directly through radio with Requiem and Omega. So with his quick summary out of the way, why do people think that Zykov is the Forsaken? And it has actually a lot more to do with the Forsaken than Zykov himself, even though there is some suspicious things that he does himself too. But first things first, the reason why people have any suspicions is because the Forsaken has a history of attempting to manipulate people, and the most obvious scenario is with Valentina, where he tricked her that he was her father, Dr. Vogel, and with this tried to use her to escape the Dark Aether. Now, this isn't the only time. There's a time where he tried to trick an NSA agent that his wife was trapped in the Dark Aether and she needed to escape, and there's another time where some random dude was tricked into thinking that his mom was trapped in the Dark Aether and needed to escape. And because of this, and because of the pattern we've seen, it sounds slightly familiar to what Zykov's been saying. I mean, what has he been asking us ever since he talked directly to us? It's that he's been trapped there for so long and he just wants to go back home. And because of this, it sounds slightly familiar that this is someone who is supposedly trapped in the Dark Aether that just wants to go back home. And this follows what the Forsaken has done thus far. But of course, just saying that someone who's trapped in the Dark Aether wants to go home is going to be true whether it's Zykov or the Forsaken, so we need a little bit more than that. And this is actually where it comes to Zykov himself. Because as I mentioned in his quick summary is that Zykov was a Soviet engineer during World War II. And because of this, we do know that when he actually entered into the Dark Aether was in the year 1944. And the events that we are currently going through are in 1983, 84, and 85. And we'll just put that at 84 for simple math reasons. Because if we just add some years together and we assume that Zykov is 20, and that's kind of generous, but if we assume he's 20 when he was trapped in the Dark Aether, and we just have to add the time in between 1944 and 84, that would be 40 years, so 20 plus 40 is 60. So that would make him 60 years old, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But then you have to remember, time in the Dark Aether doesn't pass the same as it does in the regular universe, because what we learned in Firebase Z when Samantha was trapped in the Dark Aether seemingly just for a couple days in the regular world, when we actually freed her from there, that she experienced a lot more time has passed. And it's never pointed out exactly how much more time has passed for her, but it is assumed to be a couple months to maybe even a couple years. So time passes a lot faster in the Dark Aether. So why doesn't that apply to Zykov also? Because shouldn't he be like long dead by now? Because if a couple days in the regular world are equal to a couple months or even a couple years in the Dark Aether, how long is 40 years in the regular world in the Dark Aether? That must be at the very least hundreds of years, maybe even thousands, right? Like that just seems like it's been a very, very long time. So why is he still alive? Now, there's a couple outs here and there. You just say that maybe just for Samantha specifically, time passed faster or something like that, but we just don't have any evidence to back that up. So we just assume that the experience Samantha experience is universal to the Dark Aether, but that again isn't confirmed. But regardless, because of this, it makes Zykov quite suspicious because it seems like he should be dead, and he also has that same sentiment that the Forsaken has been giving out when he is pretending to be someone that he is not. And because of this, a lot of people are very suspicious of Zykov, even saying that he is very likely to be the Forsaken. Now, this seems to be all great and all, but there actually are some problems to this theory that a lot of people aren't really bringing up. And the first thing I kind of want to point out is how different it is that the Forsaken has manipulated people in the past compared to what Zykov is currently doing. Because as I mentioned, the Forsaken has tried to manipulate people at 3 different occasions that we are currently aware of. And one of them used her father, which obviously was Valentina, but the other 2 I mentioned was their wife and then their mom. And as you can tell there, that every person he manipulates, he kind of caters his personality to that person that he knows that they will be weak to, and he tries to manipulate them with those people. But for some reason, he's not using anybody who has a personal connection to anybody in the story. And instead, he is using some random Soviet soldier from World War II, which just doesn't seem like it is going to have that same effect here, right? Like that just seems off. Why is he using this time, assuming it is true, why is he using some random Soviet to manipulate both the Requiem and Omega? And then on top of that, why is he using that exact same person? Why is he using Zykov for both people? Because as I mentioned, he normally caters to the person he is trying to manipulate. At one point being someone's mom, dad, and wife, but now it's Zykov for both the Requiem and Omega. That just doesn't seem to really kind of match what he has been doing in order to manipulate other people as compared to what Zykov is currently doing. And because of that, that leaves some question marks here that why is his methods different now? And that's not the only problem here. And the other thing is what Zykov has been doing this entire time. Because the thing is that Zykov was literally the first one to tell us about the Forsaken. And I mean, if you're the Forsaken, why would you want people to know about the Forsaken? I mean, when he was trying to manipulate all the other 3 people, he never told those people he was the Forsaken, because that wouldn't make any sense. If you knew something so scary was in the Dark Aether, why would you let anybody know about that? It just doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, maybe it's because he's potentially knew eventually we found out, and maybe he just saying like, well, I guess they're going to find out anyways, might as well be the one to tell them to get ahead and maybe try to earn their trust in that way. But I just don't know about that, because how would the Forsaken know that we were going to find out about the Forsaken? It just doesn't make any sense to me currently. And again, that's not it. And there's one final thing that really makes me question the validity of all of this. And this has to do with not what he's told us as in Requiem, but instead what he's told Omega. Because what he's actually told Omega, and it actually seems like he's told Omega much more than what he's told Requiem, but one of those things is how to build a weapon specifically to fight against the Forsaken. Because if you guys remember back to the first Outbreak main Easter egg, there were the inversion warheads. At the time, we thought Omega was just trying to do some evil things with them, but later we learned that those inversion warheads were specifically made to fight against the Forsaken. And we also learned that Zykov is the one who told Peck how to build these. Now, there's a huge question mark with how the heck does Zykov know how to build this thing, but that's something for an entirely other time. But currently, we do know that these inversion warheads are very successful at fighting off the Forsaken, because we literally saw a mini inversion warhead used against the Forsaken. In fact, we as Requiem strike teams are the ones who did it, because if you guys remember the Easter egg for Maurer Toten, we built a mini inversion warhead and sent it through the Dark Aether with Klaus to stop the Forsaken from entering this universe. So we could see right there that Zykov had Omega build a weapon to fight against, and a very successful weapon that could fight against the Forsaken. And if he's the Forsaken, why would he do that? And because of this, I'm just not sold on this. I just can't get on board with Zykov being the Forsaken. And that doesn't mean that he's 100% not the Forsaken. I mean, I've been wrong about different things in the story multiple times throughout this season, but I just can't get behind it with knowing everything else that I've mentioned here. But even if he's not the Forsaken, that doesn't mean that I trust Zykov, because there are two hugely suspicious things about Zykov. And the first one was that I mentioned earlier in the video, is that Zykov should be long dead, right? He shouldn't be alive. So was he corrupted by the Dark Aether? Was he turned into something else? I mean, he himself has told us that the Dark Aether has changed him, but he really hasn't told us how. And if he did it change him and even manipulate how he thinks personally, or what's going on with him? And then on top of that, why does he have so much knowledge about things he just shouldn't know about it? He just shouldn't know how to build an inversion warhead, or even build the machine he is currently telling Peck how to build for DLC 4. It just doesn't make sense, and there's just something very, very suspicious about Zykov. But is he the Forsaken? I honestly don't know. It just doesn't seem to me currently that there's enough evidence to say that concretely, or even where I feel good about it. So what I'm generally trying to say here is that I don't think he's a Forsaken, but I think he's still a sussy baka. So that's generally the vibes I want to give off with all this video. But regardless, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on everything we went over here in this video. Do you think Zykov is the Forsaken or not? And if he isn't the Forsaken, do you think he's a good guy or not? I'd love to hear all of those thoughts and opinions down in the comment section, because I mean, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world if there are just two bads in the story. I mean, that's kind of Treyarch's whole thing, is like, there's not a choice between a good side and a bad side. It's between a worse side and an even worse side, right? So it might be a situation like that, and that's what I personally think is much more likely, that Zykov isn't a good guy, but he's not as bad as the Forsaken or something like that. Anyways, though, I'm going to wrap it up there. But if you guys did enjoy the video, definitely do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go. I'll catch you guys next stream, video, or whatever the heck it may be. And laters, guys.